Hey everyone! Ha! It has been such a journey to get to you today, and it has been fun. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are joining me from. We have had some wonderful technological fun on our way to you, and you know what? Let me just start off by saying, Patrick Britton, master extraordinaire of all things behind the scenes. I'm going to go mute another computer. Hold on one second. Patrick, this is for you. Yeah. And I don't even know how to mute this computer. So, yeah. Anyway, that's what that is. Anyway. Hey, everyone. I'm Barton Seaver. Welcome to our wonderful Ruby events. I'm so thrilled and happy to have you. As I was saying, thank you to Patrick Britton, the master of technology behind the scenes at Ruby, who always does an amazing job, and today had, for unknown reasons, a different set of challenges on his hands, and we are thankful for him. Anyway, I also wanted to just say, as I do when I start off these events, that I'm thankful for you. Why? Well, you know what? Because I don't get a whole lot of adult time outside with friends, etc. during this pandemic, with the little boys at home with me. And you know what? I've come to really, really enjoy these events. And though I just end up, I'm talking really to a picture of myself on my camera here, so that just makes me, I guess, male, right? Always talking. But anyway, I really enjoy these, and I enjoy all of the back and forth and the camaraderie that we built. And you know what? As I like to start off these events, also just saying something that I'm grateful for. Because food is love. Feeding people is an act of kindness and love, and the very best ingredient that we have is, in fact, gratitude, right? Respect for those we feed. And, well, something that I'm grateful for today is that over the last week, I have been getting emails from a couple of you out there in Ruby land, part of the Ruby family, just thanking me for this event, or otherwise just connecting about this or that, which I always encourage you to do, barton@ruby.com. But I wanted to say thank you especially to Judith and to Pilar for reaching out. I am grateful for you, for being my friends and my colleague, and yeah, this is wonderful. So with that, Patrick, I can still hear you. I don't think you're on mute on your side. And with that, we're going to dive into squash. Why? Because squash is awesome. Why? Well, because autumn is even better. Autumn is like the very best thing that there ever was, right? I mean, it's the melding of cooking seasons. We still have tomatoes and fresh herbs and all of the wonder of summer just sort of winding down, zucchinis, summer squashes, beans, etc. But we're also getting into the cornucopia of the bounty and of the harvest. And yeah, this is just my favorite time of year to be cooking. The flavors get a little bit richer, they get a little bit deeper, they get a little bit more sensual, in my opinion. They get more layered, complex even. And squash, to me, is just, it's one of those things that is just something to look forward to in life, is when the squash season comes. So what squashes are we going to be talking about? Well, a whole bunch of them here. And Patrick, I had sent you a picture of a whole bunch of squashes that I've got. So if we could show that there for just a few seconds. This here is if you can see this picture, this is a blend of the squashes that I got. I went out to the farmer's market with my boys, Rosie and Alden, this past Saturday, and I was pushing Rosie in the stroller, and life was just great. And then Alden really, 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 really wanted a big pumpkin. So we got a big pumpkin, and that ended up in the stroller instead of Rosie. And then we bought all these other squashes. This is in addition to the very big pumpkin that we bought. So now all of a sudden I'm holding Rosie or chasing him as he goes waddling, toddling around. And all of this for you, to bring them here to you. So let's talk about some of those squashes. Patrick, if you could come on back to me, please. We've got a number of them in the back here. Some of them I've already prepped up as well. So we'll talk about some of the differences in them. We're going to be talking about cooking methods. We're going to talk about some sort of just innovative, fun dishes, not innovative necessarily, but maybe out-of-the-box dishes to think about. And, of course, we'll be taking all of your questions, because that's the fun part for me. So please, would you ask some good questions? I love it. Anyway, over there on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see that little questions box. Type in any question that you have, or scroll down through the questions that have already been asked. Find one that's particularly relevant to you that you like, whoop, click that heart button, and whoop, it gets voted up to the top to make sure that I get to it. Now, I've got a fairly hard out here today, about 3:05 my time, just to let you know. So I'll try and be a little quicker than I normally am, but I love sharing information with you. So let's talk about dem squash. Dem squash, dem squash. There's a whole lot of different varieties. And they look so good, all perched together like that in that photo I showed you, right? Yeah. Well, it looks good out in my front stoop, too, because there's no way I can eat all of this in any given time frame. So let's just dive into some of them. Spaghetti squash. I think many of you are familiar with this, especially our plant-based whole food diet. Whole Foods plant-based diet folks, spaghetti squash is just a really wonderful and versatile ingredient. It is absolutely different than any other squash in that it has these long, stringy, fibrous tendrils that grow through it that make it look just like, anybody guess? Spaghetti. Right. Yeah. And it holds its shape. It's like a spiralized or a julienne zucchini or something, like a zoodle, but in its natural form. But it's not like that until it is roasted. Only when it is roasted do those fibers really come apart, so you get those individual strands. So bake, boil, roast. You can roast them whole. Whenever roasting squash whole, prick it a couple of times all the way into the seed cavity. Why? Because otherwise you are cooking a squash bomb. Bomb, B-O-M-B, because steam builds up inside and can break that wide open, and then you have a wonderful, fun cleaning task on your hands. And also, oh yeah, it can be dangerous because it's a squash bomb. Anyway, I love to roast this just until done, just until a fork can peel back those spaghetti strands all the way down to the peel itself. The peel on this is not really edible. All squash peels are edible. Are they worth eating? Oftentimes not. They tend to be too thick. That is the case on this one. And then you just sort of start your dish. Now, for me, I love the flavor of butter in the fall. I don't really use it at all in the summer and spring. But with these foods, man, talk about a brown butter with a couple of leaves of sage thrown in there just at the end, some caramelized garlic chips in there, and then throw your spaghetti squash just to warm through. Maybe a spoonful or so of water, 4 ounces or so would do it enough, just to sort of bring the squash juices, the garlic, that flavored butter, and that sage all together into a nice glazed sauce. Do you need the butter in there? No, not at all. Could you use olive oil? Absolutely. If you're doing olive oil, I might suggest going a little more Mediterranean. How about some rosemary, some thyme, or even some very, very small, scant amount of dried oregano would be really, really wonderful with spaghetti squash. So there you go, spaghetti squash, different from all of the others. All right, butternut squash. Everybody knows butternut squash, right? When I was coming up in the kitchens back in like the mid-late 90s, butternut squash seemed to just appear. Like it wasn't an ingredient that we really knew much about from a culinary perspective. All of a sudden, butternut squash soup was on literally every single menu I'd ever seen anywhere. And it became very much the darling of cuisine. Why? Because it's sweet and it's dense and it allows you to do just about anything with it, right? So, butternut squash. When buying a butternut squash, of which I don't have a whole one right now, I cooked and cut some, but you've all seen a butternut squash before. And what do you look for in a butternut squash? Well, here is something I want you to consider. So this is another variety of squash, and I'll talk about this in a second, but it will illustrate what I'm talking about. A butternut squash grows long and straight, mostly, right? What is the more useful, easy-to-use part of a squash? Well, it's the dense, uniformly shaped, and dense stalk aspect of it, right? Yeah, so I look for butternut squash that are stalkier, that have a longer, elongated sort of shaft area. That's a bad way to put it. Anyway, longer area to work with up there, because once you get into the seed cavity, you end up with, no matter how you cut it, you end up with different sized pieces that are going to cook slightly differently. Plus, honestly, it just takes a lot more work to get after this and to get it all prepped and peeled up. So if you've got a really big seed cavity and a small little stem area, right, you're just kind of creating more work for yourself. That said, the flesh that's just inside the squash cavity, right near the seeds, I find to be very, very delicious. It's slightly a bit sweeter. So, yeah, it's up to you. If you're making soup, it's not going to matter. Why? Because you're blending it all up together. But if you are roasting it, as I did over here, let me just get a towel instead of burning myself, as always. What you end up with, and I'm just going to move a little closer, is a number of different opportunities for sort of how to cut. But one thing is that when you are roasting or sauteing or doing anything like that, the point of it is that surface area contact to the heat, right? That is where you build up this caramelized flavor, crust, texture, and really accentuate the flavor, right? So you can see what I've done here is I've just taken off just the very base of the butternut squash, and then I cut off the seed cavity right about at the top. And I've just left that. I took the seeds out, and I just left that as a little disc. And I roasted that along the same time as I did, same pan, with these little cubes that I've cut, as well as some sort of batons or matchsticks that I cut, just to give you an idea of, well, some different plating presentations for that. So with that, that was a pan, cast steel pan. So this is a Le Creuset pan, just a little bit of oil, salt, no pepper. If you're going to put pepper on things, to me, put it on after, at the end of a dish, to really get the most flavor out of it. Threw that right in the oven, about 400 degrees, and just let it cook. It was about 20 minutes or so. Now, thing about butternut squash, it's a little bit like a watermelon, in that it's got a lot of water in it. When making soup, when roasting, etc., a lot of what you're doing is kind of reducing that moisture out of it to concentrate those flavors so that you get that most bang for your buck. So an interesting thing happened not so long ago from a chef named Dan Barber, somebody that every one of you should know about because he is a hero. He's amazing. He is a friend. He is an inspiration. But one of the things that he kind of thought about and considered was like, hey, all these farmers, these local farmers that chefs celebrate, relationships with, they're just kind of growing whatever they grow out of the seed catalog, and then they just kind of throw it at market, right? And then a chef takes that butternut squash, and what's the first thing they do? They go back to their kitchen and kind of reduce the moisture out of it. So Dan was like, can't you just grow a reduced butternut squash? Look at that cutie. Ah, look at that. It's so cute. Right? I mean, it just makes you want to buy it because it's cute. This is called a honey nut squash, amongst other names that have come along. But what is this? It is a butternut squash that, like Steve Moranis, just went, right? And except it got more flavor. Well, not more flavor, it got less water, and therefore a higher volume of flavor to the volume of flesh, right? Man, and when you take a look at this, I've got some that I roasted off, and I grow these in my garden, amongst many of these. I actually grew about half of these. But, yeah, things that come out of the oven are hot. So I just chunk these in half, straight in half. I don't bother with taking out the seeds because I can take those out once they are cooked. You can see this flesh, well, the skin takes on this really nice caramel sort of ochre hue to it a little bit. And I take out the seeds if I'm not going to use them for crispy seeds, and we can talk about that. Just take it out once it's done because it's so much easier and you actually get a higher yield out of it. I did nothing but a little bit of salt on this. You can put oil in it. But at this point, this is ready to eat. You really need not do more with this to make it absolutely delicious than simply a little bit of salt and just scrape the flesh while right in that skin. And make sure you get all the way down to the skin itself. And what I love about these is that it begs you for this preparation because it's so easy, it's so delicious, but also you don't have any leftovers, folks. If you got a family of 4, fine, roast 2 of them. If it's just 2 of you in the kitchen and in the table, guess what? No leftovers. You don't have to eat butternut squash for 4 days just to make use of it, right? So there you go. There is an entire dish served to you in its beautiful shell, right? That's a really nice way to do it. Acorn squash the same way. Delicata squash you can do the same way, though its skin is more delicata, delicate. But the flavor of this, sometimes people will put molasses, honey, maple syrup, brown sugar in the cavity when they're roasting it, maybe with a little pat of butter. This doesn't need that at all. The lack of moisture in there, it doesn't mean it's dry. It just means it is fuerte. It is all that it should be. Todo. It's just everything right there. You don't need butter. In fact, butter would take away from that. You don't need spices. You don't need anything else to make that any more glorious than it is. Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to eat that for dinner. No, I'm not. I'm going to eat it while I'm talking to you. What else should we talk about? Okay, let's talk about whole roasting things. I'm going to keep eating that. Whole roasting things. Big old squashes. Big ones like this. This is a Rouge Vive de Thon, which is a French sort of butter pumpkin or cheese pumpkin style. It's got a stringy flesh to it, but it's very dense, beautiful orange. You can see this color on it. I mean, there is no filter on this video right now. Like that is just absolutely gorgeous, right? I mean, that is nature. I mean, the best way to describe this color would be like sentient orange. I mean, it just makes you believe that nature has a plan and is beautiful and is wise and knowing, as represented in a color such as this. Sentient orange, Rouge Vif de Thon. Yeah, there you go. This is obviously more than one serving, more than 2 servings, more than 20 servings. This is a big pumpkin. So what do you do with this? What I tend to do with large pumpkins like this is I will just roast them whole. Knife all the way around, make sure you get all the way into the seed cavity. The flesh on this one is probably about that thick. It's probably about 2 inches thick or so, but it's got a nice big cavity in it. And when you roast things whole, this is a smaller, different variety, but very similar pumpkin, very similar squash. This is called a Speckled Hound. This is another one that I grow. Sometimes known as Dakota squash. By the way, every squash that you can grow, you can find 20 names for, just FYI. It depends on really which seed catalog and which region you got the seeds from. But so what I've done here is I've just, on a sheet tray, about 380 degrees, 375 or so, punctured it a number of times, and then just let it go. And these are good. These types of pumpkins are great because that skin sort of buckles off and sort of puffs up to the point where it just peels away that easily, which is really the most convenient thing you can imagine, because now I got 100% yield on this thing. Only the skin comes off. There you go, right? I mean, why bother taking the skin off ahead of time if it's going to do the work for you? So you get that whole thing peeled, and then, of course, you're going to have the seed cavity. Now, on the inside of this, you're also going to have a whole lot of moisture because it's basically sort of sous vide itself, despite having those punctures where steam can escape. Steam escapes, yes, but most of that moisture stays inside. The liquid stays inside. And what I do here is just cut out the very base or the top. Cut that away. That is 100% edible right there, of course. A spoon. Now you would want to save all of the delicious liquid that is in here that you are going to release. Now the other thing that's great about this is that that structural integrity is still very much intact. So I'm doing it more gently than otherwise I necessarily would, especially if I was making like a soup or something where this whole thing is going to get pureed, right? But I just kind of want to keep the structure of the squash intact. So here you have a fully roasted, 100% edible, skinned squash. How beautiful is that? Man, you put a custard base in there, glaze the whole thing on the outside with some maple syrup. Wow. I mean, talk about a dessert. Serve chilled. You know, chill it down, cook that custard, and then serve it chilled. Or chill it down and serve it the next day. Brought back up to room temperature or something. Oh my gosh. And it's already as sweet should be. Honestly, you don't want it any sweeter than this. So just a little bit of maple around the outside, throw it under the broiler or something like that. It's a really fun, beautiful dessert. Or make some squash soup, right? And serve it up like that. It's kind of a fun thing. Like it's not, it would be messy for sure because you break into it and it would, but talk about just an interesting way to do it. Or you put a cilantro almond pesto in the middle of this, maybe put a giant chunk of burrata or mozzarella cheese all over it and serve it like that as a whole dish, maybe some salad greens around the outside. But you know what? Let's go back to that burrata and this cilantro almond pesto. Yeah, fill it up with cilantro almond pesto, a big chunk of burrata on top, and then sliced into that. Oh my God! I just came up with that idea, by the way, and I'm very happy with myself, and I might do that for dinner tonight. In fact, I will. Great, so I'm not going to deconstruct this anymore. And I have a lot of cilantro out in the farm. So, an idea like that, a fun way, especially at a dinner party, you know, or Thanksgiving or something, like a fun vegetarian, not vegan, but a vegetarian centerpiece type thing like that, where you fill it up with this wonderful cheese. You could even bake like a raclette in here or something, a little more Swiss, sort of French Alpine style. A brie cheese in here, put a cranberry compote over top, something with a little bit of acidity to cut the sweetness of this, and then some breadcrumbs and bake the whole thing so you have this textural contrast and that sweet creamy cheese on the inside. Man! Que fuego! I am on fire today. I am loving this. Man, I'm in a good creative space right now. I'm having fun. And thank you for letting me have fun. So those are squashes like that. Obviously, you wouldn't want to do that with a squash this big. It would be a little tough, but I tend to cook it that same way. And then I will just freeze bags of the puree. No, I won't puree it necessarily, but just chunks of the cooked flesh. The reason why I freeze chunked, or freeze, both chunks, but also cooked, is that frozen squash, it loses, because it has so much moisture in it, it's going to lose a lot of that cellular integrity to it. So you're never going to really get beautiful, great chunks out of it. It's going to turn to mush a lot faster than necessarily you might want it to. A big pumpkin like this, you might get away with it, but if you have big pieces of whole roasted, you can thaw those out and then take them and you just sear them on the stovetop in a nice cast iron pan, something like that. You're going to get a lot of crust, a lot of char, while still maintaining some of that texture, so you'll be able to use it as a bit of a centerpiece. I'm going to wash my hands a little bit here. What do you think? All right. So, Patrick, I'm going to ask you to show our video here in just a second, but I've taken a video that shows another way to whole roast squash, and that is in embers. And this is a recipe that I used to make at one of my restaurants called Bar Pilar, which was fire roasted ember roasted squash hummus. Made, just take out the chickpeas, add ember roasted squash. So I'm going to show you this now. Patrick, if you would please roll this 3-minute video, and I'll be right back with you. So this is the other view of my kitchen. So this is what it looks like. Just, yeah, there you go. So I'm cooking some things outside. So this is my colleague Katie, who makes absolutely everything happen. So this is the rest of my kitchen. There's real life chaos for you right there. Do not think that I don't live the life of a regular human. Chaos. Okay, so this is the yard. I talk about the yard all the time, right? But I'm out here and I wanted to show you this. Which is the, I think I know how to work a grill by now, right? Okay, so this is the ember roasted squash, and while I was doing it, I figured I would just throw a mess of eggplants on there as well. But you see in there I've got some wood that I've let burn down, not all the way nearly, but it's nice and smoky. And yeah, woo. There's the Kabocha Squash underneath there. That's right in the embers. And yeah, so that's it. Basically, I cover the grill and just let it go. Those eggplants are pretty much done. I'm just going to turn those into baba ganoush or something like that. But hey, you know what? While we're outside, meet the rest of my house. So here's my cute little house. It's backside of the kitchen, and then dining tables. There's the chicken coop, and oh, let's give you the whole yard, huh? So here's the farm that I'm always talking about. There's the old pear tree, the chicken coop out back here. That's my office, my little E.B. White writer shack. It's the peach tree, and then yeah, our giant barn. And all along here is where I have my orchard. Right through here, I've got about 28 orchard trees planted. This is my pollinator garden here. It's a xeriscape garden, so drought resistant. And then down this way, we've got the pepper patch, the cardoons, all sorts of basil in there, all sorts of peppers. These are Spanish and Korean peppers that I smoke and dry. Fire pit, that's the, you know what? Let's show you the office. I gotta hurry this video up because it was getting a little too long. But yeah, there's my very sexy little office. Yeah, you know what? My 1-year-old loves to take that thing apart, let me tell you. So, and then this is the farm. We've got about 1/3 of an acre under raised bed here, and it's utter chaos, and I let it grow over. And this is a whole row of peonies here, but then squash and tomatillos. We've got all sorts of, those are black chickpeas growing. Marigolds planted throughout. Trellises, which hold up the beans, which only make it easier for the deer to eat. This is seaweed that I've just gathered here for mulching over winter. This is the sweet potato patch back over there. More beans, tomatoes. There you go. So Patrick is, he requested a 2-minute video. We're at 3 minutes and 30 seconds, so I'll see you back in the kitchen. Yes, it was. Hey, everybody. Welcome back, and I hope you enjoyed the tour of the farm. You know, I was out there just filming I just wanted to show you the ember roasting, and anyway, enough of, we're all friends here, and just, I talk enough about the farm that I wanted to show it to you, and I'm also showing it off, because, God, I love this place. This is Maine in October. So out back behind the office there, which I pointed out and showed you, just about 20 yards past that, through a dense woodlot that I work. I cut down trees for firewood. Just about 20 yards past that is, 30 yards past that is the ocean. Yeah, we get the sea smoke, ocean mist fog blowing in the mornings. Oh, life is delicious here. All right, so those ember roasted squash, what does it look like when it's completely done? Look at that sexy. Oh, right? Look at that. And that skin just flakes right off, yielding this incredible flesh. Now, this is a Kabocha squash. Fairy tale pumpkin is another name for it. And, well, it is as delicious as a fairy tale. It is also very hot. Ow. This is amongst the sweetest of all of the squashes, and its flavor is straight up dessert, unless it's mixed with a slightly bitter component that very quickly brings it back to sweet savory. You know, it very much has a place on the table, whether or not that's underneath a protein, whether it's a veg-based protein, plant-based protein, or animal protein. You know, in a mashed potato style mix where it's mixed in with potatoes, mixed in with rutabagas, mixed in with turnips that have been simmered, and maybe just a little bit of white wine, which adds a great acidity, but also this sort of poignant counterpoint, is really wonderful. It does really well with just as a puree on its own, of course. This I would mix with butter. It's a little bit starchy in its texture. If you're making a hummus and you have the oil in there, obviously that takes care of it, but it does need a little bit more. But that sweet, smoky flavor of it, man, it is the best. Other types, other Kabocha squash, turban squash, buttercup squash. Again, there's so many different names for these. If you're interested in growing squash, I recommend to you the Fedco catalog, Fedco, Fedco. It's a Maine company that I buy most of my seeds from because, well, their seed stock comes from Maine, so these are plants that are oriented, well, they've grown in my geography. So they are used to the weather here, basically, just the way that you have acclimated to wherever you live. The plants that grew the seeds that now grew this are acclimated to Maine. So I love Fedco. Johnny's is another one. Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds is another fantastic one. They've got products from all over the world. And you know what? Pour yourself a glass of wine deep in February in the dark, dark days and dream with optimism and hope of all that is to come out of your garden. It's one of my very favorite activities, something I look forward to in February. Other Koji Nut Squash. This is another mix coming from Dan Barber's Row 7 Seeds, Row 7, R-O-W 7 Seeds.com. This is another sort of hybrid, not genetically modified, just hybrid, the same way we've done plant breeding forever and ever. And this has the starchiness of the kabocha, the fairy tale, with the sort of the ease of use of a butternut type thing. So really good squashes here. Acorn. Those eggplant, by the way, just because I have them here that we're showing in the video. Look at that. Yeah, those are really tasty. I'm going to puree those up and just put them away in the freezer for now. Okay, so I want to talk about one more type of squash, and then I'm going to make a dish. And then we're going to take some questions, folks. Well, 2 dishes, maybe. So this is called a Crumbancino Squash. Zucchini rampicante, other varietal names to it, but basically it looks like a trombone, right? And if you really let these grow, I had some last year. If you go back and look through last fall's events, there was one sitting on my back corner, which was started here and maybe ended up here. It's a lot of squash, but they grow really easily. They're really delicious when they're green, used as a zucchini. But then they also mature into a autumn squash with a hard, durable skin to it. And that is the difference, by the way, between autumn squash and summer squash. Summer squash don't have a skin. Think about zucchini. Zucchini is not going to hold moisture in the way that a butternut squash does, right? It's the thickness of that skin. Also, just the timing of when it grows. Zucchini prolific throughout the season. These are sort of all gunning for one crop right at the very end there. Each plant might typically have 3 to 6 fruits on it, whereas a zucchini, oh good Lord, neighbors lock your doors. It's zucchini season, right? Anyway, very silken texture, very soft, sweet flavor to it. Doesn't have that nutty aroma to it, but it can be drawn out. This is just a beautiful sort of workhorse squash. Makes a very, very silken puree that you can use as a sauce, which is why I love it so much, that it has enough moisture. You don't have to add a lot to it to make it nice sauce out of it. Just laid out underneath whatever protein or whatever other vegetables you're doing. So the dish that I wanted to make, and this was based on one of the questions that I saw come up, which is that we tend to think of squash as a side dish, but it can be really, really great when made into a composed dish or really the star of it. And one of the other questions that I saw, and I can address this directly, but was about Delicata Squash, which I mentioned earlier, which is kind of like an acorn squash, but with a very thin skin to it. Here is a Delicata variety, and the question was, how do you cook it other than just roast it? Well, you can cook it any which way. A tempura of it, deep fried in a batter, is really, really wonderful. Roasted, grilled, broiled, sautéed, and mounted with butter, whatever. Basically, it's a very, very diverse. But the way that I wanted to show you today is I just threw it on the floor. Cut it in on the diagonal, so on a bias. So I was cutting it like this, so I get more surface area out of it. Also, I break up those fibers a little bit, make it a little bit softer. And I just threw it in a pan with oil and salt, and I did not take the seeds out. And the reason for that is that those seeds become really, really crunchy, really, really flavorful, and add an incredible texture as well as, of course, nutrition to the dish. Now, the outsides of this, I broiled this just a little bit. I finished it. Oh, the groundhog is out. Sorry, I get distracted by things that want to eat my farm. Hey, hi, I'm back. The skin of this broiled a little bit gets a little bit crispy, especially right around the edges, so you have a huge amount of textural contrast here. And that's what I really like. I mean, especially, check out this piece right here. Look at that. Yes, it looks a little bit burned, right? That's okay. Why? Well, because the rest of it is so sweet, it's so delicate, it's so nice, that that crunch and that burn and that slight bitterness is really going to add a lot to the dish. All right, so the sauce that I'm going to make for this, I've got some Greek yogurt. I understand our plant-based folks are not going to be using this, but there are many other types of yogurts you can use, nut-based yogurt, etc. But what I'm going to do is, this is one of my very favorite sauces, and it's this simple. And the way I do it, I've got this agrumato. Those of you who've been with me before know that I love this. This is a olive oil that is pressed at pressing with ripe lemons. It's not lemons infused into it later. It is literally pressed with it. Just a few drops of that, and this is not necessary. But I've got it here. But I just whip together Greek yogurt and olive oil. And probably about a quarter cup of yogurt, about 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and some salt. And I whip that together until it's silken smooth. Now what that olive oil does is, of course, it adds fat, but a huge amount of flavor, and that yogurt just carries that flavor forward in a really, really beautiful way. Kind of highlights a little bit of the bitterness in the oil, but also the sweetness and the green, grassy, floral aromas to it. So I'll keep going with this until it's really, really soft and whipped. I'm not going to do that on camera for you because it's not the most interesting thing I could be talking about. So anyway, so I would put that down at the bottom. The other things that I will do here are some other bitter greens. So this is a Radicchio that I just picked this morning. This is a Fiero Radicchio. I'll pull off those outer leaves. I'll cut down around, and I just made that little circumferal cut. It's not a word, but you understood what I mean. Just in order to help get those off a little easier. Now, Radicchio, another one of the things that I really look forward to in this season, just bitter, pungent, but also sweet, very peppery. And look at these leaves. I mean, they're gorgeous, right? They're absolutely gorgeous. And just, I mean, it looks like a sacre-coeur. You know, it's absolutely beautiful. So I will lay some of those down. I'll take some of the sauce. You see me? Yeah. I'll sort of spread that out. Now, look at that. Look at that chef being a chef there. How do you put sauce on a plate? Like that, of course. That's fun, right? Why do I put it that way? I don't know, because it kind of just, my hands took it that way. But really, I put it that way because, and don't be afraid to go all the way up onto the rim because it's just kind of cool. Why did I do it that way? Because it creates 2 separate plating zones. It allows you to just kind of have a little bit of fun here. So I will lay some of these greens down here. And then take your nice big pieces of squash there. Cut them down, serve them with those seeds right in it. And the other thing I really like about this is that once you cook it like this, you have a lot of structural opportunity, meaning you can stack and stack up. The other components to this dish that I'm going to do are some hot pepper, some sweet pepper, some cilantro, some Persian basil. Now, this is not a recipe. Just go out and use what you've got, okay? This is not about having exactly what I say, but what you want is some pungent herbs. I've got mint here, and any of you who have joined me before know that I love me my mint. I really love me my mint. And any of you who grow mint know that the only way to handle mint in your garden is to use it all the time and to use all of it. So, use it robustly. Let's see, I need to wash that mint just a little bit, excuse me. I've got some cilantro that I just pulled out. Well, just take those big stems off the back. Sort of interlace it throughout. I will gonna chop the mint just a little bit. Using the mint really as a salad green more than anything else. Let's see. These are banana peppers that are great in season right now. And I'm going to use a Korean chili as well. Just I like a little bit of heat. You can use a dried chili, you can use a fresh chili, a jalapeno, serrano. You can use not a spiced chili at all. So I'm going to blend these up, and you can't even tell which one's the spicy chili, which one's not. Put those right over the top. And then that's, well, you know what? I'm going to call that done. So look at that. Man, all of that together, like that, is a very nutritious meal. It is an incredibly easy meal. And basically everything on there is raw, with the exception of the Delicata Squash, which took one pan, an oven. Yep, that was it. Okay, well, that was easy, right? And then just because I have them, because I wanted to talk about how to make them, I have some squash seeds. I roasted up a butternut squash, as I was showing you earlier. What I do to roast seeds, take them out. I don't bother with much of that flesh that holds them in there. I just throw it all right into salted water. I boil them up until they're translucent, pretty much. Pull them out, drain them, pull the seeds off of that flesh, and then a little bit of oil or not, you don't really need it, and throw it into the oven while your squash is roasting, and there you go. So, a little bit more crunch on top just because I had them. In this case, I wouldn't put them on if I wasn't doing the Delicata with it already. But there you go. There is a very fun, out-of-the-box, creative sort of entree, appetizer thing. But you know what? It's missing something. Can anybody tell me what it's missing? Acid. Not much on here is acidic, aside from the yogurt. So, because the first thing I'm going to do once I get off camera with you today is put this in my face, I'm just going to make sure that it's correct and right. So a little bit of lime juice over the top, vinegar, whatever you want. I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah, whatever herbs you want. That cilantro and mint sort of take it in a bit of a North African sort of direction, a southwestern Mediterranean direction, if you will. But you can do basil, you can do oregano, you can do whatever you want, but just make sure they're soft herbs, not rosemary, not thyme, things that you'd actually want to eat. All right. So with that, that was my squash demo. Let's talk to you. Let's take some questions. All right, folks? We got about 20 minutes, 25 minutes here. And yeah, I appreciate y'all being here. Okay. From Eunice. Hi, friend. Can I explain the flavor and textural difference during different varieties? And is there a rule of thumb to know what's inside the different looking shapes and colors, or is it just memorization? In my opinion, it's just kind of memorization, because I've had butternut squash that are so starchy, and I've had butternut squash that are like watermelon. It depends, I think, on the farmer a little bit. So, yes, there are sort of some universal rules that you can apply to it. So, acorn varieties. So, you know what an acorn squash is. That's going to have that sweet, tender flesh that's going to roast down and be basically fork pliable, right? Butternut squash is going to be like that. Some of the newer squashes like koji nut are going to be like that. So if it has this general shape to it, you can bet that it's going to be edible as a rough puree, or just sort of with a fork. If you're looking at butternut squash, that really, really dense, very thick, stalky squash, then you can see that you're going to need that you can have a little more structural integrity to it. Also, just by virtue of the shape and structure of it, you can do more. You can cut steaks out of it, right? Not just big giant donuts, but steaks. So you can saute that. You can grill that. You can get just a little bit more manipulative with that. You can braise it into a green chili, into a green curry, a red curry, etc. You're just going to have a little bit more leeway from a structural standpoint, but the texture is still going to be fork tender. Big squashes like this can run the gamut. If you're talking about cheese pumpkins, they can be really, really watery. If you're talking about a fairy tale squash, as I roasted here in the embers, it can be very starchy. So that's where I think it does come down to just a little bit of memorization. But one trick is that if your squash, if you cook it and it's different than what you expected it to be, great, go with the squash. Let the squash tell you what to do with it. If you thought it was going to be really starchy, but you cooked it and it's just kind of oozed out onto the thing, well, great. Enjoy your squash soup. Go for it. Don't try and make it into something that it is not. That's a great general rule for cooking, but especially with squash because it does have such variety. Hey, Eunice, thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining. Cynthia, hi, friend. When freezing stock or soup, what's the best type of container to use? I've been using inexpensive quart-sized plastic containers, freezer bags. Should I wait until the soup or stock is completely cool before putting it in the plastic? I would say yes, generally, on completely cool. Just from a safety standpoint, though, I don't think you're really, from a food safety standpoint, I don't think you're really pushing any boundaries here. But yeah, freezer bags are not meant to be hot, really, and I don't know the chemistry of bags and how that works, if there's any chemicals leached or anything like that. So here's what I do. I make stock, and to be very honest with you, in my family, for my own health safety standards, like I am okay with, I leave it out overnight to get down to room temperature. I think that helps with the clarity of it. I think it helps with the overall flavor and the texture of it, really. And I can't tell you why. That's how I like to do it. The professional me will tell you that, yes, you need to get it cooled down as fast as possible. You know, that is food safety 101 right there. So that is my official answer. Putting it into plastic freezer bags is what I do here. We don't. I don't care to have all of the plastic Tupperware around. I don't have the storage area for all of that in terms of the quantities of stock that I make. The quart containers, you know, what you get large hot and sour soups in or a large wonton soup in, those are known to leach chemicals in some cases, so I don't mess around with those. So I do quart-sized freezer bags because anytime I use stock, I'm using it pretty much with quart units. So pull out one bag, pull out two. Plus, it freezes easily, and you can very easily get it into the bag and then freeze them flat and then store them stacked up. So that's how I do it. It works best for me. Hey, thanks, Cynthia. I appreciate you. All right, from Vera. Since most squashes are peeled, does it matter to buy squash that is not organic? Interesting question. So with squash, well, with the organic, just on the outset. If you're buying in a large grocery store, you're buying from generally large organic producers, then yes, it really does matter. If you're at a local farmer's market, oftentimes organic is maybe outside of the business model of that farm. That might mean that they are entirely organic, or in fact even better than organic in their practices, but organic is a legal standard and definition that you have to apply to, you have to be audited, you have to data. It is a process, and it costs a lot of money to be certified organic. So if shopping at farmers markets, just ask the farmer, hey, are you proud of how you grow your vegetables? Are you growing them in ways that are complementary to the environment? And do you feed them to your family? If the answer to all of those questions is yes, organic or not, whatever. Doesn't matter to me. I'm trusting the farmer on that. So that's just the thing about organic there, first and foremost. But because they are peeled, I don't think it's... Pesticides end up in plants two ways, one of which is that they are drawn in through groundwater or through exposure. The other is that they sit on the peel. The squash plants, by the time that the squash itself is ripe, getting ready to be ripened, or really in its phase, that's when the pests for squash are a problem really at the beginning of the season, is what I found in my own gardens. When you get the beetles and they're in their mating season and they're all over the squash, that's when they are a problem. So I don't know this specifically, but if I were a farmer spraying for things, it would be at the beginning of the season, at which point the pesticides or whatever would be used. Yes, it would be in the ground, it would be on the plant, but not necessarily on the peel of the squash. So I don't really have a great answer for this in terms of specificity, but I would say organic or local is always better. And with squash, the cost that I have seen in the cost difference between organic and non-organic squash, or conventional squash, let's call it, is not huge enough to be a real obstacle. Admittedly, for me, I'm in a very comfortable economic category in that I can decide to buy organic. I'm not rich, but food is a priority to us, so we spend our money on it. Trying to give an answer that's mindful of many different circumstances here. So anyway, thank you very much for your question. I appreciate you. Hey, Melissa, was wondering what kinds of spices would be good with acorn squash. I'm looking for options not too spicy. Okay. Also, do you have any favorite ways to eat squash in a breakfast situation? I like that. I like that you call it a breakfast situation. It's intriguing. Like a movie, The Breakfast Situation, or a really bad NBC drama, The Breakfast Situation, on NBC. Not picking on NBC. Anyway, Bart, hi, you're so weird. Okay, hi everybody, I'm back. Breakfast. Scrambles are really great. Under a Benedict, something like that, you can do a butternut squash cake instead of the bread. Instead of the English muffin, something like that. Just cut a steak of it. And one other thing, when slicing or prepping butternut squash, I think you can lose so much of it that I tend to use a peeler to peel off the skin, and you have to do 3-4 passes maybe, but you end up with a greater yield off of it, and I think also a nicer product, and it's safer. So that would be one way to use it. Cook it up the way that I have over here in these nice big chunks first, and then, you know what, make a frittata out of this, throw in your eggs around this, and then bake it off again. Or just do sort of throw some peppers and onions in with this and saute it down, and then fold that into a scrambled egg or inside of an omelet, etc. Just be aware that you're adding a huge amount of sweetness, not sugar, not inappropriate amount of sugar, but just there's a large amount of sweetness to the flavor profile of it. So make sure you add something a little bit bitter in there, just to offset that a little bit, so that you have an interesting dish throughout the entire eating of it. If it's just sweet and eggy, it's going to get pretty tiring pretty quickly. If you have a nice little bitter component, something a little bit spicy, maybe some coriander, some fresh ground black pepper, something like that, that's going to add some real interest and sort of that counterpoint to it. In terms of spices, not too spicy, Add them at the very end first, but cook them for maybe just a minute. Throw the acorn squash under the broiler after it's been cooked. So take it out when it's cooked, apply your spices, and then throw it back under the broiler just a minute. And this is why. You don't want to burn those spices. And if the time it takes to cook acorn squash, it generally will burn the spices. You want to avoid that. So things that I would really like with it, let me see. Here we go. Just off the top of my head and just sort of looking at the rack. So one thing to add a little bit of spice, but not spicy, garlic powder. Definitely takes it in a very savory direction, which acorn squash can sometimes get overly sweet. A little bit of garlic powder on top, onion powder as well, adds that immediate savory appeal. Turmeric, sort of color for color, like and like there, but it will add a very nice undertone, very low hint of spice. Chinese 5-spice would be another thing to use, and I was reminded of that because of ginger, powdered ginger. Very, very nice for this, especially with a little bit of butter. Butter and ginger go really well together. Just a very light sprinkling of that on top. Careful, because it can make it feel a little gingerbready, Christmassy sweet, right? But especially if you were to mix it with tiny little bit of garlic and the ginger, you are in pure savory territory there. Coriander seed, I had mentioned that before. Use ground coriander, not whole coriander seeds. Fennel seeds, because I love fennel. I buy it by the pound. Yeah, I bought a pound of fennel about a month ago, and this is all that I have left right there. Like probably 1/6 of a pound or so. Fennel seeds ground up would be really nice. Again, adding a nice floral sweetness, sort of accentuating the sweetness, a nice floralness to it, but also grounding it in the savory. And then I've got this from Burlap and Barrel Spices, a really great online retailer. And this is black lime. These are fermented dried limes that take on a smell and are just a flavor like absolutely nothing else. I think I bought this for $12 or something. A little expensive, but a little bit goes a long way. Absolutely incredible, especially with sweet. This is made in Guatemala, but it's also made, I know it's in Egyptian cuisine, in Tunisian cuisine. When I was living over in Morocco, I found this as well. So those are there, some advices, but also some sweet peppers, raw. These are those banana peppers again. Add a really nice touch to things. A hint of bitterness from the peel. Nice counterpoint. All right, there you go. Thanks. Oh, a bunch of questions. This is great. Gina, what would be your most recommended squash side dish for an elegant dinner party? Ooh, well, this one would be very, very nice. You wouldn't have to make it as complex as it is here, but just those delicatas, sauteed, or even just a preheated baking dish. Then throw them in so they get that sort of sauteed quality to them. Make sure they get nice and crusty. Stack them up with a little bit of yogurt and mint. You're golden. It's wonderful. Maybe a little bit of shaved chili pepper over the top to add some counterpoint to it, but that would be absolutely, absolutely delicious there. Another way to do it, something I made the other day, is I have a bumper, huge crop of eggplant out there. I've got all these beautiful Rosa de Melanzana, these beautiful little eggplants like this. I mean, I have hundreds of these right now. I've taken to just chunking these up into big cubes and then boiling it. And in acidulated water, I'll throw some butternut squash cubes in there as well and boil them together. And then drain them off once they're soft. Pine nuts, some olive oil, some fresh herbs like mint or basil, and some thin sliced shallot, something to give it just a little bit of texture and just a little bit of that sort of piquant spice to it. Wonderful, wonderful side dish. Beautiful, colorful. If you're using purple eggplant, leave the skin on there. It's just a wonderful mix. Nice, nice dish. And served at room temperature. Best if made the day before and then just left out at room temperature. So dinner party, easy. There you go. Thanks, Gina. Debbie, do you like to combine different varieties of squash or primarily stick with one at a time? When I was in restaurants, I combined them. You know why? because I had restaurant quantities that I was dealing with, and I was feeding 500-800 people a night. So I could do that. In my home here, no, man, one butternut squash is like 3 days worth of meals, right? So I tend not to mix them for that reason. I love mixing them though. And if it wasn't for that, just that sheer volume conversation, yeah, I'm one acorn or delicata like I've done here, one butternut squash mixed together, different textures, different sweetnesses. Sorry, y'all, I can't wait for you. Oh my God, that is so good. Oh man, I should be a chef. That's amazing. Seriously, that's one of the better things I've ever made. And I would tell you if it was SHIT too. It's not. It's one of the better things I've ever made. All right. So that's why if you're doing a dinner party, if you've got that volume of people to feed, or you just want to give away some things to neighbors and you've got the squash because you're growing it and you can afford to be generous, hey, do it. Yeah, mix them up. It's really fun to do that way. The same thing is like I like to have a glass of Pinot Noir and then a glass of Sauvignon Blanc with dinner when I go out, right? You could buy a bottle of one thing or you could get a couple of things by the glass. It's nice to have a little bit of a blend. Keeps things interesting. And in squash, that's important because it can get a little sort of monochromatic in terms of flavor and texture. All right. Hi, Judith. Nice to see you, friend. I'm grateful for you. You love delicata. Are there any ways other than simply slicing it in an oven, roasting it? So that's what I did, is sliced it in an oven, roasted it. I talked about tempura, though, sort of answering your question earlier. Talked about that in tempura, but to me, delicata, what else to do with it is what you partner with it. So here, the radicchio, mint, cilantro, sweet and hot peppers, and yogurt. Wow. Like, that is a really good dish. You can go in any which direction or cuisine sort of you want to go with. Go in with that. Pestos work really well with it. So to me, it's a dish, it's an ingredient you get really familiar with, but it's sort of an endless palette of things you can pair with it, and that's where the fun of it and diversity comes in. Thanks. All right, from Veronique. Hi, friend. Do you have a good healthy gut autumn soup you can share with us? Yeah, so probiotics in that, healthy gut. So I add, I am not whole foods plant-based, but so I use yogurt, kefir, labna is my favorite. Labna is a very, very dense, thick, strained yogurt from the Middle East, very much like Greek yogurt. So I will add live culture yogurts, goat milk yogurt to my soups, puree soups like a butternut squash, instead of cream or butter. I like that yogurt because I also like the acidity to it. So there's your probiotics. Also, I will add turmeric. I will add ginger to the aromatics at the beginning. You don't want to over toast them, but simmering that in for sure is a nice way to add that in. And then a nice little garnish to soups for a little sort of prebiotics. Cabbage. Cabbage is really, really nice and a great textural contrast, but you have to slice it super thin. I'm talking paper thin, like read through it. But a little curtido, sort of an El Salvadorian pickled cabbage. I mean, very, like, basically shave it on a microplane or a mandolin as very, very thin as you possibly can. There is no such thing as too thin. And mix it with a little bit of lime juice, lemon juice, olive oil, whatever, and salt, and just let it sit for 5 minutes. A little tangle of that, a little jungle dingle right in the top of it. Really nice textural contrast. There you go. All right, friend, thanks for joining us. From Jane. What's the safest way to handle carving a squash? Great question, and I didn't get to this earlier, but I'm glad that you mentioned it. So I'm going to do it on one of these little butternutitos that I have here, the honey nut squash. If you are cutting it, here's the rule of thumb. This thing wobbles. And if you're taking a very sharp knife and trying to cut something that's really kind of hard to cut because of its dense peel, right, and it's wobbling, you're in danger. Can I show you something? I didn't reduce my yield, but what did I do? It don't wobble no more now. No, it don't now. Okay. There you go. Now I can cut. and it's not going to wobble. I can put pressure on this thing, and it's not going to wobble. If you're not cutting it up and down, great. Cut off some of the side. Same thing. Ain't going to wobble no more now. That's how it is. There he is. So that's what you got. And yeah, that's how you do it. And this is true of onions. This is true of watermelons. This is true of garlic. This is true of anything. Give yourself a stationary thing to work with, and you're all going to be better off for it. All right, here you go. From Adolf. Hey, friend. How are you? Nice to see you. Thanks for your tour of the lovely home. You're, of course. Didn't notice where your garlic patch was located. Well, the garlic patch is now the black chickpea patches. So I sort of succession planted those. The garlic came out in June. I rotated around. I've got 17 raised bed boxes over there, 12 by 4, which is quite a lot of raised beds, plus a couple other patches. So I will rotate the garlic around, putting about 3 years between plantings in any given soil. So I pulled that out in late July. I'm sorry, I said June. I pulled it out in late July, early August, and then I hang that in the rafters. Then I planted the black chickpeas, a nitrogen-fixing crop. Any sort of bean is, especially if you inoculate it, which I've done. So it is under second crop. And also I had planned for this, but I had also because I'm basically using the black chickpeas as a cover crop, a soil amending crop. I will get some harvest out of it, but it's really about improving the soil. I also planted the boxes around my garlic beds with some squash that I knew was going to run. And I've let it grow into those beds, as well as some tomatillo plants that I knew were just going to be like, oh, is there space here? I've got like a 12-foot wingspan on one tomatillo plant right now. And so I you didn't see the garlic patches because they are completely covered in other greenery, all of which will get tilled into the soil in order to improve it. So, but hey, I appreciate you paying attention, man. Thanks, Adolf. Appreciate you. How did you peel the butternut squash from Julia? So give yourself a solid surface to work with, as I just showed you if you're using a knife. But the other way that I have 7 of these things. Where are they? There it is. I use a Y peeler. I do not use any other style of peeler than this, and for that you just take off the top and the bottom, and just being careful, work your way around, much like you would an apple or a pear, etc. And I like this one because you're not pushing, you're pulling. And pulling is a lot easier and safer motion to me. Yes, you can push. I don't know why you would. But you might get not quite as deep as you want to on that. And honestly, that's fine. It's going to cook up and caramelize. But if you want to go a couple of peel layers down, do so. And there you go. Just go all the way around. All right. From Angela. Oh, hello, dear friend. Any other autumn squash seeds edible besides pumpkin and pepitas? Do you use autumn squash seeds beside pumpkin or pepitas in some of your recipes? Thanks for your response. Of course. Every squash seed is edible. Some of them are better edible than other, or sort of better flavored or better able to be roasted down. So some squash seeds just get very, very thick with a very dense, woody, fibrous, lineous tissue shell to them, hull. Those are really never going to roast up very well. That's just the bottom line. But before I roast any squash seed, and I will use every squash seed that I use, that I grow, I boil them first in salted water. And I was telling you about that a little bit earlier. And the reason for that is it softens that lineous tissue. And especially when those squash are very fresh, come straight out of the garden to the farmer's market, they haven't had time to really overwinter for those seeds to get into like winter mode and lose their moisture and really sort of bed down. They're ready to go. And just making them a little bit softer with that salt water, also infusing that salinity all the way through rather than just on the outside, allows you to use less salt. Drain them, get all the fibrous tissue off them, though you don't have to, because some of that just burns and chars and gets all sweet, nutty, caramelized on the outside, and it's really tasty. Yeah, go ahead and use that. Just throw it in the oven. You can dry toast them, you can oil toast them, you can deep fry them, you can air fry them, you can toaster fry them, you can do whatever you want to them. But don't do anything else while you are doing that, because they will burn on you. Bottom line, just pay attention to nothing but that. Use it as a Zen moment. Be mindful. When you are eating, eat. When you are sleeping, sleep. When you are with your children, be with your children. And when you are making toasted squash seeds, be with them. Be one with them. Otherwise, they will burn, your house will stink, your oven will smell acrid, and you will be mad. Rather unzen, isn't it? Angela, always nice to see you. Thanks, friend. All right, from Aristella. Wonderful name. Aristella. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Bravo, Chef Barton. Well, thank you. The squash demo has been excellent, and I over for the wonderful variety your creator shared with us. Well, I agree. Isn't nature just, it's delicious. Now I want to go out and purchase squash. Well, please do. Go to your local farmer's market and just revel in the bounty. Bring much more cash than you thought you would, because let your inspiration take over. You know, because this is the season. This is what we live for. This and many other things, of course, but man, what a time to be alive, right? All right. I don't like Radicchio, says Julia. Can I use arugula? Of course you can. Of course you can. You can do whatever you want to, Julia. And you know what? The result is going to be delicious so long as you like what's going into it and have fun doing it. I hope you enjoy a good glass of wine while doing it too. Yeah, this is not a set standard ratio recipe, etc. This is just what was looking great to me in the garden today, what I've got. But what you want there is that bitterness pairing to the sweetness of the squash, and arugula with its peppery bite and slight bitter aftertaste absolutely provides that. All right. Pilar, hi friend. Love the tour. Thank you for sharing. Well, you were so very welcome. As I said at the outset of this, I am so grateful to share some of my days with you. It really makes me happy. I hope they make you happy. You keep coming back, so I think we might be onto something together here. All right. Much love to you all. Bon appetit. We'll see you back again. I think maybe the next one I'm going to be doing is probably a Thanksgiving precursor, right? Maybe I'll do that. But, as always, if you have any ideas of things that you'd like to see, send me an email, barton@rouxberuby.com. Follow me on Instagram. Hey, if you want to check out any of my 8 books out there, please do. I'd love the support. And otherwise, I'll look forward to seeing you back here soon. Thanks, friends. Be well.